is reading CSV files, and we're going to talk a little bit about dynamic programming. So what you're going to do is there's a branch for the calculator program called CSV, and that's the code that we're going to be using. I'm going to open up PyCharm, and I have the code here. And also inside of Canvas, if we go back to the main page, there is a tutorial on reading CSV files, which explains this in detail. All right. So the first thing we're talking about, like, what is a CSV file? So a CSV file is a comma-separated value file. You could separate values by other things than commas, but traditionally it's been commas. As a developer or just a person who might be expected to do tasks working with data, CSV files are the most common way that you're provided with information that you might need to perform analysis on. So, like, server log files are organized by CSV files, government statistics, any sort of data you're getting from a source, in most cases, is going to be provided to you in a comma-separated value file. And one of the things that you kind of have to understand is that there is one of the, how should I put this? If you had a job as a data analyst, one of the things that you might be asked to do is clean up dirty data. So dirty data is data that is not standardized. It's got maybe missing values or has values that changed over time. It's inconsistent. It's got issues with it. And where Python's going to come into play with that is, or any programming language with reading CSV files, is basically being able to take the CSV file and write a computer program to clean it up. Because you can kind of imagine that a CSV file is basically a single Excel spreadsheet. So or a single spreadsheet in a spreadsheet program. So I'm going to go to Google Sheets, and I can make a new Google Sheet, and I'm just going to say, like, username, password, fname, lname, email. All right, and then I could have like K William, test, Keith Williams, Keith at K William at njit.edu, and I'm gonna copy this so I don't have so much to type, but and I like, or actually just do it, J Smith test, James Smith, J Smith at njit.edu. So I have this sheet, and if I wanted to get this as a CSV file, I would just go to File and Download, and they're going to give you an option to, and notice it says Current Sheet, because when you download CSV files, they're just plain text files, and you can't have multiple sheets in one text file. So I would just go and download this, and I can take a look at it. I'll just open it up with text edit to show that all it is just the values separated by comma. That's what I call it. It's comma separated value file. The first row, many times in CSV files, most of the time, it contains the field names, but sometimes CSV files don't contain field names in the first row. Like, for example, server logs. Many times server logs, like who accessed a website or did something, they just are separated, comma separated values, and you just have to know that each position is a particular field. You'd get like what they call a data dictionary that would tell you what that data is inside that CSV file, and what position it is in the order of commas. So if we go over to, I'm going to go to the tutorial. And in here, my example is a little bit more advanced than here because I was looking. I'm going to illustrate some other things with my example, but the code's pretty straightforward for here. Python has built into it a CSV Reader library, so you have to import CSV. Okay, so, and then what you do is it says like with open, and then here's the name of the file. And if it was in a different directory, you'd have to put the directory path. It has to find the file. And then what happens is that this file text gets read and loaded into this variable CSV file. Then what happens here is the CSV library, that's this. There is a reader method, and you pass in the file name, in the file contents here, and whatever the delimiter is. The delimiter in this case is a comma, but you could have semicolons or other things. Then this will read the contents of the file and put it in as a data structure, which is known as a list. All right, and we'll take a look at the list in a second. And here we have where essentially the CSV Reader has the contents in a list, and it's going to take each row. This is a for loop. So each row that's in the CSV Reader's list, like each element in the list, is going to be stuck in row. And then if it's the first line, or line 0, because we start counting from 0, it's going to print out the column headings, and then it'll increment the line count by 1. And then the next time the row goes, it's going to print the data for that column. All right, and you can see, like in a list, you see how it says row bracket 0. This is the first element in the list. All right. This would be the next record. So a list is basically, if we just pull up, do a notepad here, let me show you like the output of this, or in the input, what a list looks like. So a list is a data structure, and the list looks like this. It looks like 0, or let's do it this way, key, value, and then that's like imagine that's like how it's organized, where you have a 0, and then this would be first name, and then in here you would have, it's kind of like I do first name, last name, email. So lists basically have keys and values. And then in a list, you just refer to, if you want to get the value, you just grab the key. So the list here, the row, its list is each field from the CSV file for row 1. And then to access the keys, I just say row bracket 0, and then that's the first element. The vocabulary is that the list items are referred to as elements. So the first element in the list is a 0, next element is 1, next element is 2, next element is 3. So if I want to get the first element, it's going to be row bracket 0 to select that value out of that element's position. Does this make sense? We got this? So in the tutorial, what will happen is that you can, just so we understand this a little bit, the CSV Reader here is a list of lists. So what this data is like, a list of a list, like it's called a multidimensional list, and it would look something like if we were to look inside CSV Reader, it would look something like, so let's say if this is row data structure, if we were to look at what CSV data looks like, CSV it's just embedded lists. So if I had, I'd have a key of 0, and the value for the key of 0 oh, it's not letting me back up, would be this, and then let me just copy this. So then and this one would be like be something like that. See how like you have, it's a list of lists. So if I wanted to access, like if right now it's going through a loop, the for loop, and the for loop's taking the list items out, like the first, it's like they're nested. So like this list has a list of all the records. That's CSV Reader. Then inside each row has another list. Each row is composed of a list, and it's got its lines, its elements inside of it. We kind of got this? So it's like lists can be inside of each other. And generally what happens is that you look at the code. Go ahead.
So the key wouldn't actually be 0. The key maybe would be like a IP address.
No, the key is going to be 0. The value, so in a list, the keys are always integers.
Okay.
All right, they're always, it's just like if you had a to-do list, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, or it starts with 0, and it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the value is whatever you want to store in that key. The value could be anything. It could be whatever. It could be an object. It could be a anything. You could store plain text. You could store whatever the value could be any type of data. And we have and in this case, like I said, like it could be you can have a multi-dimensional list or and that's just it's got a list within a list. And you could have list within list within list within list. Like you could have right, you'd have to iterate through like so for example, if we look at the code here, this is like list processing. Like this for loop is processing this list that's inside CSV Reader. That's the first list. That contains the record, like the row of the CSV file. And then inside that row of the CSV file, it's got fields. So that's the other dimension of the list. And so what's happening is it's taking the first element of the list, which contains another list, which is the fields, moving that list into row. Then row is being processed to print out the fields or to figure out if it's the first row or to print out the field names, or the second row, which would be the values that would go into those fields. And like here's the output. So let's say it's like column names are name, department, birthday, month, and then this is all the text that is being printed out in here. So it's like column names are printed at the top. That's the first iteration because that's the 0 element of that list. And then these are the next elements being printed for each row that's inside of it. Okay. So what you end up doing is when you have lists, you want to look at the data structure of how those lists are organized, and then by doing that, you'll know, do I need to loop through one list, or are there lists within lists that could be looped through? Because sometimes like you'll have a record and then fields that are another list, and then those fields could have other data. It could be nested within each other, and then if you want to go through, if you need to go through each list that's nested, then you use the for loop to go through that. Now, what I'm going to do is we're going to go down and we're going to look at another data structure. Okay, so another data structure is what's called a dictionary. The dictionary is basically a variation of the list, except instead of using integer keys, a dictionary uses string values. So in this case, what happens is when we look at the little program here, we open up the file, same basic procedure, but we use a different method rather than Reader. We use Dict Reader. And what happens is that instead of having a list data structure, it has a dictionary data structure. And a dictionary data structure, it's got, instead of having integers as the key, it's got strings, essentially. So like here, when we're accessing the keys, we're calling them name, row, department, birthday. So if we looked at the dictionary data structure, the way it works, you're going to have first name, Keith, Oops, let me just back this up. So a dictionary data structures has the names. The keys are basically the names of the fields. So in this case, what happens is that the program, rather than having to remember, oh, first name happens to be in the 0 integer field, you can see the dictionary structure, and when you print it out, it'll literally just print out something that looks like this, and it'll tell you what that field is. All right. Now, a lot of times you see lists and dictionaries combined, because what will happen here is, if I take the copy of this, and I think it's going to, if we have, let me just do the next one here real quick. Actually, it'd probably be easier just to copy it like this. So I'd have like record, the first record would be 0, and then the second record would be 1, and this would be Joe Smith, J Smith at NJIT. So just one second.
Dictionary or a list?
It's both. See, like the.
You said list of lists. That's the only one you didn't update it yet. Oh.
So
it'd be list of dictionaries.
Yeah, let me just see if I can actually move this up here. Yeah, it's a list of dictionaries. So you have the key. The first, it's two data structures combined. It's the list is an integer. Okay, so it's like record 0, record 1, record 2, record 3, and then the value inside that's stored for that is a dictionary, and that dictionary has the field names specified. Okay, so you can, it's just these two data structures are generic, and they're used all the time, and they're just like bread and butter. Like that's like in programming, this is the meat, like this is bread and butter all the time. These two things are, you're always like, I am almost always working with some sort of list or a dictionary or both.
How about arrays?
So in some languages, like in PHP, for example, PHP doesn't have a list or a dictionary. They just have arrays. And then they have arrays and associative arrays. But those are the same. They're just two names for the same data structure. Like PHP doesn't call it a list. They call it an array. Like the sort of generic term that is computer science used for data structure is list, is integers with values that can be whatever, and then dictionaries are strings that you for the keys, and values that could be whatever.
So the dictionary keys always have to be a string?
Pretty much.
Can you not have numbers?
You could have whatever you want, but it's how should I put this? They have, they're going to treat, how should I put it? Basically, in the programming language, they're going to have methods that can work with lists, and there's methods that can work with dictionaries, and there's some things that you can't do with dictionaries that you can do with lists, and vice versa. Like, so you could put a number in as a key of a dictionary, but the dictionary is going to treat that as a string. All right, essentially as a string, because and where you see these come up all the time, like these is with data. So this is like, well, it's SQL or database, any database. Okay, so what'll happen is that just imagine that this is good. You're going to see this all the time. Like whenever we're getting SQL results, like we send a query to SQL, it's going to come back as a list with dictionaries that are the fields. So it's going to be a list that's like record 1, 0 is the 0 position, a dictionary of the field names for that record and the values for that record, and then it's just going to, you just got to get really good with it. It's not hard to do this. Like, it's just, you got to know one's a list, one's a dictionary. Both of them, lists work like task lists of task 1, 2, 3, 4. They're just integers as keys, and dictionaries are using strings as keys so that you can, and the benefit of using dictionaries is that you can refer to fields by their name and not remember the integer. And the value of the integer or the list is that you don't have to know what the fields are going to be called. Like you could have, because like if you're going to use a dictionary, you got to put names for the keys, or those keys have to have names.
They all have to be uniform.
And they all have to be consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So, and so but with integer, with a list, you could have, 0 through 1,000,000, and you don't need to know how many fields you have. You don't need to know as much, like, because like just think about it. Like I always imagine like the database query or an Excel spreadsheet. You see an Excel spreadsheet, each row is going to be a list. That's the number. That's the list, and then each field is going to be what's in the dictionary. All right, and in the CSV reader, as long as the file has fields, like as long as the first row of the file has the field names, you can use the dictionary reader to conveniently organize your retrieval of results by the record number, which is the list, and then the dictionary, which is the field names that you would have. Okay? And so it's really, if we go back to the code here, it's really straightforward. I mean, it's like they make this CSV reading is super easy. It's just like open the file. You don't even have to close the file. It does it automatically for you. You see the colon here? That's the beginning of a loop. So this with right here is actually a loop. Then it just comes in, reads the file, and then it counts the lines, and then we just take the row and process the row and just keep going around in the loop. So it's like it reads one line, comes to here. Like basically the way I would read this, like the way it's actually working is, here's with is a loop. So I have the CSV file. It's saying go and take a line take one row out of here, put it into CSV Reader, and then put that row here to be able to process the columns in that row. Then it loops back here, gets the next one, and then does the and then processes the row. Okay. Now, they don't show you this, but we're going to look at this in my example, because my example is going to show you some ways to work with this, because you have to kind of imagine that in this case, it's just, in their demo, they're just printing out the contents of the row of each iteration of the reading the file, okay? They're just printing it. They're not storing anything, they're just printing it. So I'm going to go over to my program, and let's take a look at what it does. So here, this is a modified version of what was happening. And what happens is I have a property called data, and I'm setting the data to be a list. That's with the two brackets back against each other here, you see? That's like telling data it's going to be a list. So it's like if you want a string, you put like 2 quotes, but a list is 2 brackets. So data is being set up as a list. Once it's set up as a list, that list has methods on it that are built in to operate with it. So here, what happens is, I'm going to go over to my test file real quick just to show the beginnings of it. So what I do is I instantiate the CSV Reader module class that I just made, and I pass into it a text file, or the path to the text file. Let's go inside the Reader class and just follow it through. So here, this is the constructor. I take the file name in the constructor, then I open the file, and I have store the file as I'm reading it in text data. And what I do is I have a CSV data. I read a line, and I use the Dict Reader so I can get the field names. And then you see for row in CSV data, what I do is I take that row, that dictionary, and I add it to data. All right. The reason why I'm doing this is I want to be able to tell it, here's my CSV file, and I want to read all of those records into a list that has a dictionary with it, so that after it opens the file, reads all the records, that I end up with a variable, the data property, that contains all the records from the CSV file in a list of dictionaries that name the fields. Because I want to be able to work with that data at some point to read it, modify it. I don't want to keep, depending on what you're doing, and you don't want to keep that, when it's reading the file, it has the file open, and when the file's open, nothing else can get into it, and it's kind of slow to have, like, every time you open the file, that's like it locks it, and it's sort of faster to open it up once, get all the data, load it into memory, and then just have that data to work with it on whatever way you wanted to do. So for example, with your statistics program, I'm going to end up this weekend, I'm going to post some CSV files with data you can use. And you're going to want to be able to read the CSV file, have access to all the values in the CSV file in memory, and then run the calculation on that on the data that's in memory, not have to read the file one line by one line to do the calculations. Because like if so for example, imagine you had a whole bunch of scores for baseball, like you had scores for football, and you wanted to figure out the average score for the Steelers over the course of a season. You'd have to have a list of all the scores of the Steeler games in the list, and then do the and then average them in memory. Like you can't just essentially every time if you don't load the data into a list and store that data somewhere else after it's read, like as it's reading, you load it into the list, you won't be able to just perform calculations on that data without going back to opening the file up and reading it again. Because the other thing about it is that the file, you can't just jump to, when you're reading a file, it has what's called sequential reads. And that means that it's like, if you go to the file, it's got to read every line of the file. You can't just skip to lines of the file. It's got to go line, 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 line. It can't just skip to whatever line you want. It's going to have to read every line. So if you're working with data, you usually want to have it in a list of dictionaries so that you can perform calculations on that set of data that you have loaded. So here I have the row, and all I do is just like data has methods because it's a list, and append means add. So I'm just taking the row, which contains a dictionary structure, and I'm appending it to data. Now if I run this program, I'm going to run it, and what I want to do now is when I run it, I'm going to show you a new module. It's called ppprint or pretty print. All right, pretty print is a library that you can use to open up variables and see what the data structure is inside that variable. So you can print strings. Okay, so like with the regular old print command, you could print strings, but you can't just print the data structure to see how it's organized. Like, like I was doing in the notepad and I show how the list of dictionaries is set up. You can't just, if you just use the print command, it won't print that. So you gotta use pretty print to look inside of the data structure. So here what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna inside the loop here, I'm going to do pp for pretty print row, and I'm just going to run the program, and when I run the program, it's going to show the data structure of the row. So and see, when I look at the data structure, it tells me it's an ordered dictionary. That means the order of the fields has to stay the same. And it says, here's the key, the name, and this is the value that's stored there. And here is department, and here is accounting, blah, 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 blah. Like it just, that's the dictionary that's being stored in the list. So if I pretty print the row, it prints out this. Let me pretty print the data. Like, so I'm going to print out the data property that I'm loading. I'm going to move this out of the loop. And I'm going to do self.data. And let's see like the whole structure here. So I'm going to actually pull this up because it's going to be bigger. So here, the keys to look like the syntax to look for to understand it. You see the bracket and bracket. That's telling me that this is a list. And then here it just labels the data structure of what it is. So see the bracket here? That's the beginning of the list. The closing bracket's the end of the list. And then that comma right here, that's the record separator in the list that goes down to the next dictionary item.
It's essentially like a list of dictionaries.
List of dictionaries. So the purpose of this program essentially is, the one I wrote, is to make a list of dictionaries from a CSV file. Does this make sense? It's like, just think about this. I can't go into the CSV file and just pick out whatever records I want, because the file has to be read sequentially, and every time I'd want to go back, I'd have to read the whole CSV file to get a record. And if I'm going to do calculations on the contents of the CSV file, I'm going to need to load those rows, load those records into a list of dictionaries, essentially, so that whenever it's finished reading the CSV file, the result that I get is data that's in a list format of dictionaries. So that, because then it's in memory. It's not in the file. Like when I'm reading it, everything's in the file essentially. But in order to do the calculations or to pick out particular records to do something with, or to basically do anything with this information other than just look at it or print it out, I'm going to have to move that into a variable that's going to contain the contents of the CSV file. And the way that's going to be organized is a list of dictionaries that basically mirrors the contents of the CSV file, but in memory. Does this kind of make sense? Like I'm just creating, like imagine like I'm making a mirror of the CSV file, but in memory, so that I can randomly access whatever values I want and to do calculations on all of the values and just manipulate them of whatever I want to do with them inside the memory of the program. All right, so that's reading CSV files. Now, if in your programs for calculator, now, and I'm not doing this for you. You guys are going to do this. This is where you apply your CSV magic. Basically, what you're going to need to do, and I'm going to write kind of like pseudocode out here.
Is that for the test case, or are you referring to
The test case of the calculator. So this is like how you apply the CSV reading in the context of what the calculator assignment is. So the calculator assignment, you have a set of CSV files. You're going to need, you would do something like this. I'm not finishing the whole thing, but it would be like from CSV Reader, import CSV Reader. Then what you're going to want to do is probably in the setup method, you're going to do something like self.csv, so test data equals, I think you can do this, CSV Reader parentheses, and then you'd have like data file addition .csv. Actually, I'm going to do it this way because like each test has you can do it like this. So me just clean this up a little bit. I actually can do it this way. So this is like a little fancy syntax for you. So what this is saying here is I got my CSV reader. The purpose of CSV reader is to take the file and then read that file and put the contents of the file as a list of dictionaries in the data property. So what I'm saying here in this line is I want to read this file and then take the data property of it, and stick the data into this variable. It's like by using, you can instantiate an object and then call one of the methods on the object, which returns the data or accesses the data property. So like I have employee's birthday, so like I don't have a CSV. Let's just take a look at this real quick. So I'm going to run this and employee.
So did you define the .data inside it, which is a property that you're returning?
Hold on one second. Yeah, so in my library,
These have the same name as that data file, right? That's parentheses.
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just giving an example. I'm not doing the subtract. I don't have the CSV files for the thing, but
Whatever you named in your directory.
yeah, whatever. All I do is I just say, hey, this is the file that I want to use for subtraction in this case, but I'm using birthdays. Like,
you have to define the path for the file, right?
yeah, so you just put in this case for right now, you're just going to put the CSV files inside the source folder. Like whatever file you want to read, just stick it inside SRC.
So you want to save it as a text file and as a CSV file? That's also
It doesn't matter. Like CSV files are text files. You could call it, like in this case I have birthday employee.text, but I could have it birthday employee.csv. It's just like
Okay, so you just create a file and copy and paste the data inside it? Or
yeah, like you can take, like I gave you the files, you could just put those files into the source folder, just save them into the source folder whenever you download them. You can save Excel spreadsheets into the source folder as CSV, or you can save it like any spreadsheet program. If you go to File, Save As, or whatever, or Download in the case of Sheets, it'll save that Excel file or spreadsheet file as a CSV file. And the CSV files, the only reason the extension is CSV is just to tell a person it's a CSV file. The computer doesn't care as long as it's text with commas in it. Like that's the computer. Just you could have a text files or CSV file. It doesn't make any difference. Because like if I look at the birthdays, like it's just that's the contents of the birthday file. So here, what we're going to do is I'm going to, let me get my, I think I'd pretty print over here. I want to get this out of here. And I'm going to move pretty print over to tests. Make sure I have it loaded. Yeah, so I got to go from so I got to load pretty print. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pretty print test data just so we can see what it looks like.
Is there a plugin you have to like download for CSV? For Python?
I mean, you just no, you need to see it. You need inside your reader class. You need to import a CSV library. So like here, like import CSV, like gotta do that.
Okay. Gotcha. That's fine.
And here, what I'm doing is just like I got pretty print test data. So we're just going to take a look at like whenever I grab the file and have it read and then put it into memory, into the property of data, what does the text look like? What does it look like? So I'm going to run this. Oh, my bad. Hold on. In this case, I got to go over to my Docker file, and I'm going to be doing calculator tests, so I got to change which file is going to be run. What we're going to be doing next week is, now that we're getting more modules and more files, I'm going to show you how to reorganize the folder into a particular structure for projects, and I'm going to show you how to run all the test files at one time. So like in this case, we're just still doing one test at a time, but there's going to be a way to do everything. So if I do source calculator test, save it, and then I'm going to run it, and I'm going to go over to calculator test here. And I'm not sure why it's...
Your file's misspelled.
Misspelled employee.
Or it says employee birthday.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it only ran one test. It's still running CSV tests. Hold on. It's coming out here. It's still running CSV tests. Why is it? Let me just try to do something here. Oh, I'm running it wrong. Okay, so hold on. So it wasn't running the Docker file. And I forgot in my Docker file, I forgot to add the... Possibly.
But did you put it under the source? You just have to put it under the source.
Yeah, it's copying source over. Source, calculator, pytest, line, and test subtraction, employee data text, file. Maybe it's gotta, let me just...
When you go into the file path,
It's probably, it probably is this. SRC.
SR.
something like that. There it goes. So it's just like I had to put the file path all the way through. But if we look at it, it's just the data property gets read, and the data property contains the contents of the CSV file. So what you would then do is something like for row in test data colon then you would have like row value 1 row value 2 row result. Let me just close that so you can kind of see. So what we're doing is, I'm not going to run this because this doesn't work, but because I don't have the CSV file, I would basically have like subtraction.csv. Subtractions.csv has all of the, it's got value 1, value 2, and a column for result. I think that's the way it's laid out. Then it would load all that data for the test into the data property of the CSV Reader class I made, and then it would go here in the row, and you would have row bracket result, and so it would run these assertions for each record in the file. And this is basically what your code's going to look like. Like, let me just go and see what. So you got like subtraction CSV. I'm going to open this up. I'm going to rename it. Could take a look at it and text edit, just see what it looks like. Yeah, we got value 1, value 2, result. So I'm going to copy this file. Where's the copy? Stick it in the source folder. So then in calculator tests, I'm going to come back, and I think it's, if I look at the CSV file, it's got value 1 like this. So I'm going to go over.
Question. Don't you need the third parameter to also have a square bracket? Or
Huh?
go to your test. Third bracket row, you need a square, right? Or is that a square brackets?
Oh, wait, yeah. And so I'm gonna, yeah, I got subtraction, And let's just see if this, I gotta put value 1. So these field, like whatever the field names are in the file, you have to have them, and it's most likely case sensitive. And we got result, so results capitalized.
Value 2.
And then let's give it a whirl.
Hello world.
Let's see here.
Where are you storing the C value?
What'd you say?
Where is the C value getting stored?
What do you mean? What's, oh, because I think I know what the problem is here. It's reading the text as text, and it can't subtract.
Numbers as a string.
Right.
As a string, not a number.
So what we're going to want to do here is fix that in the calculator program. So in calculator program, I'm going to go to the subtract method, and
Typecast AP.
yeah. And all right, so we're going to look up, this is the solution. So there's since you have like fixed types, and like, so when it read the CSV file, it's like making those values strings. STR is for string. Well, we can't subtract strings from strings. We can't subtract text from text. What we're going to have to do is convert the text into an integer. So in Python, the process of converting like one data type into another data type is called typecasting. So we're going to type cast string to int Python. So here, let's see, base specifies the base in which the string is. Oh, come on. Int s. So it looks like I'm going to go back here and take my A and B here, and I'm going to typecast them. A equals int s comma A. Wait, hold on one second. I'm just going to put A in here and see what it does. B equals int B, and I'm going to run the program again, see if this fixes it. So it fixed something. So subtract row, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so this is showing we have a failure. So one of the records in the subtraction file says 650 is equal to negative 650. So let's go take a look at the file and figure out where that is. So that's like the first record here. So it's just saying, what'd you say? Let me just change.
The subtraction has all the negative.
Yeah, I just subtracted value 1 from value 2.
So the first one should be positive.
Yeah, so let's just see if it runs happily.
Actually, what you had is correct. If you just do B minus A.
No, this is fine. What he's doing
No,
is
B
correct.
minus A will answer all because the way.
Yeah. So let's just fix that with,
B minus A.
yeah, so. And then just. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to,
You will have to fix the test file as well, right?
yeah, so let me just take a look here. So it's like saying row 1, blah, 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 blah. So I'm wondering, like, oh, so here's the clue. Okay.
It's not equal.
It's the result in the text file whenever it's being read. This is a string. See, I can tell strings, like if you're looking at errors, I can tell when it's a string because it puts quotes around it. So I'm gonna go and fix that real quick.
In your test, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah, that's correct.
yeah, that's. I'm just wondering why it's giving me the red. Let me just figure something out here. All right, so I'm going to go over to calculator tests, and I'm just going to have to do int to result, because then that's like typecasting, it's changing the string to, and it's like now it should be, let's cross your fingers, and so what are we getting in here? Int. Oh wait, I forgot it up here. And let's do it up. There we go. It's happy now. So I'm going to get rid of this pretty print thing, and I'm just going to run it, and it's going to see our tests. And so we got 3 tests. They're good. It read the file. And it's a happy camper. So the moral of the story is when the CSV reader reads the data, all the data is string. So if you have to use the CSV data that's been read, you have to typecast it to whatever it is you happen to need it to be. In this case, we had to turn the integers, the strings into integers so that we could do the calculations. Because it won't, it doesn't, like a -1 that's a string and an integer -1 are not equal. Okay? So that's basically what you would do, is have something like this, and then just you have test files for all the calculations, and then you would use it. You could use it like this. There's the CSV Reader. You really wouldn't want to take that and necessarily. You could, but it'd be work. When you read the CSV data, you really don't know what those data type, what the field data is going to be. It could be strings, it could be integers. In this case, it's integers. Really, like you're going to have to typecast it at the point where you're going to use it, because you don't want to. Because the CSV reader should be generic enough to read any kind of CSV that doesn't necessarily have integer values in it. It could have states, it could have people's names, it could have email addresses, whatever. You're not going to be able to know what type of data is in those CSV fields when you're reading the file to like pre-do it. So you really want to, at the point where you're going to use it, you would typecast it. Like you could, here I went over to calculator and I'm typecasting in here, because that's when I'm using it to do the calculation. The result, like once it has the result of the calculation, then C is an integer. It's going to not be a string. And we have, and then row result I have to cast to an integer. So you have basically strings, integers, and floats. You got strings are strings, integers don't have decimals, floats have decimals. There's other data types too, but that's kind of the gist of it. So you might have, in some files, you might have to cast it to an int, and other ones you might have to cast it to might have to cast it to a float. And so that's what we're going to do with this, and I'm going to stop recording now.